She wrote a children's book about grief, but no one knew the truth about her husband's death. On March 3rd, 2022, 31-year-old Corey Richens put her three sons to bed in the home that she shared with her husband, Eric, in Utah. Corey and Eric had the life of international vacations, private schooling, a large house at the end of a cul-de-sac, but beyond all of that, there was something sinister brewing. That night, Corey had news to celebrate. She had just closed in on a $2 million real estate deal. She often felt overshadowed by her husband's business, but this time it was her turn to celebrate. Corey called Eric over to the kitchen. She made him a Moscow Mule, and once in bed, she told him the good news. They cleaned glasses, and by the morning, Eric would be dead. During the night, one of Corey's sons woke up crying, so she went to his room to soothe him, and she ended up falling asleep in his bed. Around 3 a.m., Corey woke up and noticed that she was still in her son's bed, so she kissed him goodnight, went back to her bedroom, and slipped into bed next to Eric. That's when she noticed that something was wrong. His skin was ice cold. She started to panic. She was shaking her husband, calling his name, but there was no response, and he was just lifeless. Corey called 911, nearly hysterical, saying, "My husband is not breathing," and once help arrived, it was already too late because Eric was already gone. Eric had no known health conditions. He was always outside, he was into fitness, so first responders were puzzled on what happened to him. Corey was dazed and devastated, and she told investigators maybe it was the allergy shot that he had gotten earlier in the day because he seemed more tired, but investigators weren't buying it because an allergy shot wouldn't kill you in your sleep. In the next couple of weeks, an autopsy was done, and it was revealed that Eric had a massive overdose of fentanyl, 5 times the lethal amount. As the investigation continued quietly, Corey was trying to help her sons deal with the grief of losing their father, and she decided to write a children's book called Are You With Me to help other children dealing with grief. Within a year of Eric's death, the book was complete, and Corey self-published it on Amazon. The book was a success, reviews were glowing, and media outlets wanted to interview Corey. But what Corey didn't know was that this book's success was about to crack open a case. Just weeks after Eric's death, a detective went to speak with Corey and told her that her husband had been poisoned. When Corey was told this, she acted stunned and said that Eric didn't do substances, so she was unsure on how this even happened. Police started receiving multiple tips, and it all said the same thing, that Corey was most likely the one responsible for Eric's death. Police already assumed that Corey probably did something to her husband because when they looked through her search history, it said things like, "How long does fentanyl stay in the body?" "Luxury prisons for rich people in America," and "How to get rid of electronic evidence." On May 8th of 2023, more than a year after Eric's death, Corey was arrested at her home and charged with aggravated murder. Prosecutors laid out a grim timeline. Eric had discovered that Corey was stealing money from him, so he reached out to a divorce lawyer so that he could cut her off financially. Corey needed to act quickly, so she took out a $2 million life insurance policy on him, and allegedly she tried to poison him on Valentine's Day in 2022, but it didn't work. 2 weeks later, on March 3rd, she tried again, and this time she was successful. Corey, who is now behind bars, is facing the possibility of the death penalty. She has pled not guilty and claims that she is innocent.
Just hours after arriving on her dream holiday, this woman would be found dead, having been brutally beaten to death. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Kiara Agnew. Kiara was a Canadian woman living in the Dawson Creek area of British Columbia. She was born on the 11th of March 1999 and was described as a very lively, energetic, bright young woman who was very adventurous. In March 2023, Kiara and her boyfriend, 26-year-old Ryan Friesman, booked to go on their dream holiday going to Mexico. This was to celebrate Kiara's upcoming 24th birthday, and she was so excited. She had never been abroad before, and so she couldn't wait. She wanted to make sure that this trip was perfect, and so she took it upon herself to book everything. She booked a luxurious resort for them to stay at, and their itinerary was jam-packed with all of the fun things. They were going to go snorkeling, they were going to visit the beautiful beaches, and of course do a bit of shopping as well. The couple of 8 months checked into their suite at the Princess Resort in Playa del Carmen. Kiara would send little videos to her family showing them the room they were staying at, the resort, and the surrounding area, and she was described as being completely carefree and that the excitement radiated over the phone. Just hours later though, she would be dead. On the 3rd of March 2023, staff within the resort noticed some red marks on the floor. It looked like something had been smeared along the ground, and there was little drips of something red. This staff member went to a nearby laundry room to pick up some cleaning products to clean up this mess, and that is when they would discover the body of 23-year-old Kiara. She was found deceased, lay on the ground, having very clearly been barbarically and brutally beaten. Lay beside Kiara was her boyfriend Ryan, who was asleep. This man was asleep next to his girlfriend's corpse. His hands and his fists were all swollen, he had fresh looking bruises, and he had blood and tissue on his body, later confirmed to be that of Kiara's. Ryan was quickly arrested by the Mexican authorities and was charged with femicide. He ended up going to a judge-only trial in 2024, where Kiara's sister gave evidence that despite their relationship being on the fairly shorter side, that Kiara had been a victim of violence at the hands of Ryan and that she was genuinely scared of him. She wrote in her diary about the escalation of the abuse, how sometimes Ryan would get pissed up the eyeballs, he would beat her mercilessly, and then when he woke up hungover the next morning, he would have no recollection of ever doing that. Chillingly, in one entry, she wrote, quote, "I think he's going to kill me." At the end of what seemed a blatantly obvious open and shut case, the Agnew family were absolutely mortified when Ryan was found not guilty of murder. This verdict was delivered on the grounds that they could not prove without a reasonable doubt that he was the person who murdered Kiara. Kiara had foreign DNA underneath her fingernails. She was beaten with so much horrific force that apparently the judges didn't believe that one singular person would be able to do that. And apparently Ryan's injuries, the swollen fists and the bruises and the blood that was found on him, wasn't consistent with the injuries that were found on Kiara. Apparently swollen fists aren't a sign of brutally beating someone to death. As you can imagine, this absolutely horrified Kiara's family, and because of the double jeopardy law, Ryan couldn't be tried for this again. He was allowed to leave Mexico and returned back to British Columbia. However, not everyone in Mexico was satisfied with this verdict. It was sent off for a formal review where it was officially overturned. Ryan is now considered guilty of the murder of Kiara Agnew. But as far as I can see, he has not been extradited back to Mexico to be sentenced and to serve time for his crime. He is still living as a free man in Canada.
Hang on, this child was missing for 2 years and was found alive under a staircase. It was July 2019 in Ithaca in New York. 4-year-old Paisley Schultes was the most adorable little girl. Super smiley, super happy, and honestly, for a lot of the time, she was looking after herself. Her biological parents, Kim Cooper and Kirk Schultes, had Paisley and her older sister removed from their care. This was like a court order. They'd been taking substances in the presence of the girls, and honestly, just not taking care of them at all by the sounds of things from the nan and a babysitter. The girl's nan reported this to police and was like, look, I'm really concerned here. She said that the parents would be out working for the family paving company, and if they couldn't afford childcare, they would just take the girls and sit them in a car until like nearly midnight. The dad, Kirk Jr., also had fraud charges on his record and charges for smoking M. The nan was eventually granted full custody of the girl. She was super happy when all of a sudden, Paisley vanished. Obviously, timing-wise, this was incredibly suspicious, and police from day one suspected the biological parents. Frustratingly, they struggled to find proof. The parents just denied all knowledge and honestly really didn't seem that concerned at all. The property was searched and police were like, what the hell, we can't find any trace of this girl. They were going through all scenarios in their heads, including like, is this a murder investigation? Have they killed this girl out of spite? The case rumbled on for years and the parents stayed suspiciously quiet until 2022 when the phone rang. Police got a call and couldn't quite believe what they were hearing, but they knew one thing: they needed to go back to that address. This time they searched it top to bottom, leaving no stone unturned. And what was weird about this house was that Paisley definitely had a bedroom in the house that even had Paisley written on the wall, and that bed in the bedroom looked recently slept in. But the granddad at the home was denying all knowledge. He was called Kirk Sr., And he was saying, no, I haven't seen the little girl since she disappeared. But after an hour, a detective noticed something very strange about the stairs. He just knew. Gut instinct was telling him the way that those stairs are kind of sat just doesn't feel right. So he took a closer look and found Paisley and biological mum Kim hiding in a secret compartment. It was apparently small, dark, and damp. Absolutely wild. Like I said, the granddad was there at the time and he just denied all knowledge. He was like, I didn't even know that that little compartment was there. You didn't know that your granddaughter was hiding under the stairs. Now, what's wild about this case is that originally both the granddad and the biological parents were charged. And the dad was seen literally laughing and smirking on his way to court. It was so infuriating. But eventually, the charges were dropped and the custody of the child was given back to the biological mum. The dad ended up pleading guilty to a load of burglaries in the area. Like, he's such a wrong 'un, and thankfully he was given 6 years in prison.
The girlfriend of Haley Beck's alleged victim gave a story time on her TikTok about what happened, and I'm going to give you guys a recap. But first, I just want to say, look at her, and look at her. Like, she's gorgeous. Anyway, she said they started dating last spring, sometime in April. And she knew that Haley had been texting him and sending him money and trying to hang out, but she didn't think too much about it because Haley was apparently doing that with other boys on the football team. And she said she didn't report it because she didn't feel like it was her place. Everybody knew what was going on and it didn't involve her, at least not yet. Now, she was well aware of who Haley Beck was before she began texting her boyfriend because she actually had Haley as a teacher the semester before. She said that after her relationship with the boy became more public, Haley apparently started questioning people about her, like other classmates, friends of hers, pretty much just anybody that had any sort of relationship with her. Haley was apparently asking people about their relationship status and how they behaved around each other. And then she was asking more personal questions like what she likes to do in her free time outside of school. She said that Haley pretty much stalked and harassed her entire junior year. And at one point, Haley apparently told one of the other boys on the football team that she was stealing her boyfriend. So she was stealing Haley's boyfriend and that she needs to get rid of her. She said that even though they're a closed campus, they're allowed to leave for lunch and that Haley would apparently give them her credit or debit card. But Haley apparently told the boy not to bring her around and that only he was allowed to deliver the food. And she said that Haley would tell them bad things about the other person, trying to get them to break up. And she said that her boyfriend told her that he only communicated with Haley so she would pass him in his class. She said in the middle of June, she and her boyfriend went to this resort in Scottsdale and he got a message from Haley on Instagram. And she got upset by it, rightfully so. And then he ended up blocking Haley on everything. And then, of course, in August is when Haley got placed on the leave. She said that the boy's parents knew about it, his friends knew about it. Pretty much everybody knew about it except for her. And she said that when the principal got the initial reports, he apparently didn't do anything about it until after the police got involved. And she only found out about the alleged relationship between her boyfriend and teacher Haley Beck after one of her friends told her about it a couple weeks ago and sent her the police report, and she read through all of the messages. And again, I'm not trying to dog on the boy because at the end of the day, he was a victim of a predator, but I don't get it. I mean, we have a steak or a kid cuisine on clearance.
It's the most devastating disaster nobody seems to have ever heard of. My brother texted me this the other night, and I just knew immediately that if he is saying something is absolutely devastating, like I needed to mentally prepare myself. Also prepare for your blood to boil because after I researched this case, I was pacing up and down like a mad woman. It was the 21st of October in 1966 in Aberfan. This is a little village in South Wales about 4 miles from Merthyr Tydfil. And it was a mining village, so over the years, many spoil tips showed up. If you don't know what a spoil tip is, neither did I. It's essentially a collection of waste removed during mining. Basically a load of sludge and muck. So during all of this mining that was going on in the village, they created these spoil tips or spoil heaps, and there just became so many of them. It was like an unofficial dumping ground. And this was going on for years. They were just adding more and more spoil onto these heaps, until they were essentially like massive mountains surrounding the village. And experts were starting to get very, very worried about them because obviously, like, it's got to go somewhere at some point. What if those spoil heaps collapse? Like, what happens to the village underneath? Now, what was even more concerning was that an engineer spotted workers tipping more slurry on top of an already huge spoil mountain. And he was like, hang on, that's right by a school. So he wrote a very stark warning to the NBC, which is the National Coal Board, saying, quote, I regard it as extremely serious as the slurry is so fluid and the gradient so steep that it could not possibly stay in position in the wintertime or during periods of heavy rain. But tragically, it fell on deaf ears. They did absolutely nothing. It was 9:15 on Friday, the 21st of October that year. The school was just about to break up for the holidays and they were due for an early finish today. The kids couldn't have been more excited, but they wouldn't make it home. The heavy rain that the letter had warned about was pouring down, and suddenly a worker spotted one of those spoil heaps and saw what looked like a black wave heading down towards the village. Hurtling towards the school was 150 million litres of slurry. That's the equivalent of 1 million full baths. But in its tracks were 2 cottages with residents inside, and you can probably guess how this is going to end. That sludge ploughed through both homes, killing the residents. But it was about to get a whole lot worse. Children suddenly heard what they thought was like a rumble of thunder outside, and some went to the door of the classroom to see what the hell it was. And then suddenly, everything went pitch black. A tsunami of slurry buried the primary school. Nearby homes were ripped to pieces. And survivors after talked about the deafening silence in the moments after that happened. And then they just started grabbing any shovels and digging with their bare hands to just desperately try and find any survivors. One teacher, Nancy Williams, bless her, tried to shield some of the children with her own body and died in the process, but she did manage to save 5 children. What a woman. Horrifically, the majority of the children suffocated in the thick tar-like substance. It doesn't even bear thinking about. And the experts had warned this was going to happen. Over 140 people, mostly children, perished in that village. And the fact that this was all preventable is what's totally horrifying for me. It's like they didn't care. The NCB chairman, Lord Robbins, lied and said that no warnings had come about what could have happened. Like, it was a total lie. Nobody was ever charged with any negligence or criminal activity. And it gets worse because the corrupt NCB then stole £150 that had been collected from the disaster relief fund. Those were donations from the public to help funeral costs and help grieving families and people who had their whole homes demolished. They took that money and used it so they didn't have to pay to remove the other sludge mountains themselves. The mountains that they should have moved in the first place to prevent all of this happening. They should have paid for that themselves first before everybody died.
The man who attacked this child and left her for dead is now free, and knowing every single detail of what he did, I genuinely cannot understand why or how. So it's April 27, 2006, and 17-year-old Ashley woke up that morning in Belleville, Illinois, got herself ready, and told her parents that she had a job interview at a shoe store and then basketball plans afterwards. And before she left, she promised her parents that she would be home before 10 p.m. curfew. So they stood in the doorway and watched her as she drove her boyfriend's SUV out of the driveway and onto the street. But what her parents didn't know was that Ashley wasn't going to any interview and she wasn't going to play basketball. She was actually driving to Latterman Park to meet up with her teacher, Sam Shelton. The 2 of them had been secretly seeing each other, and the relationship between them was the kind that a 26-year-old man should never, under any circumstances, have with one of his students. Ashley had been keeping this secret for about 2 months, and by the morning of April 27th, the weight of it just became too much to keep carrying. Because every single day she was lying to her friends, her parents, her boyfriend, and then walking into Sam's classroom and pretending that she barely knew him. And so Ashley had made up in her mind before she even left the house that morning she was going to go to Latterman Park to end the relationship. She pulled into the park, got into Sam's car, and they drove together to a secluded area. And as they were driving, Ashley kept rehearsing in her head exactly what she was going to say. She was extremely nervous, but after a while, she took a long, deep breath and told him that she wanted out of the relationship, that she had already made up her mind. Now, Sam is 26 years old and is quite literally committing a crime just by being with this girl. So you would naturally expect him to take this as a relief but he did not take it well. He started screaming at her, and we don't know exactly what he said, but whatever came out of his mouth was enough to make Ashley realize that she was trapped in a car in the middle of nowhere, miles from anyone who could help her, with a grown man who had just become someone she was afraid of. Sam at some point angrily slammed the car into park and started pounding on the steering wheel, screaming at Ashley, saying, "Get out! Get out!" Ashley is looking out of the window, but all she saw was nothing but trees in every direction. So if she hops out, she would literally be stranded out in the middle of the woods. So she told Sam no, that she wasn't hopping out of the car. But Sam wasn't going to take no for an answer. So he got out of the car, walked around to Ashley's side, yanked her door open, and then grabbed her and hauled her body out of the seat. And as Ashley sort of tried to push back and stop him, he wrapped his arms around her neck from behind and locked it into a chokehold. And he started dragging her away from the car. And as he kept squeezing and squeezing her neck for minutes, Sam felt this loud crack sound, and then Ashley's body went completely limp in his arms. And he's staring at Ashley like, "Ashley? Ashley." But she wasn't responding, and that's when he realized that the crack that he heard was him breaking her neck. Do you know how much force is required for you to do that? That is actually insane. And this is the moment that tells you exactly who Sam Shelton is. Because when you hurt someone, even by accident, any decent person would call for help. But as Sam stood over her body, he kind of realized that if he did call for help, if cops came here, not only would he go to jail for what he had just done, but he would also have to explain why he is in the middle of the woods with a 17-year-old girl. So instead, Sam drove Ashley to another nearby park. He carried her unconscious body out into the woods and laid her face down on the ground. Then he took off his belt, wrapped it around her neck, and started pulling. And he pulled so hard for so long that his belt broke in half and Ashley started changing colors. And the only reason he did this was because he wanted it to look like Ashley was taken and attacked here in the woods by some stranger. So after basically setting up his own crime scene, Sam just got up and left like nothing happened. And a few hours later, at the end of that same night, Sam decided to end his amazing day by going line dancing at his usual club spot. I'm sorry, it's just all I could think about is how he left Ashley in those woods all alone in the dark. Meanwhile, he's out here dancing, living his best life. I genuinely cannot hold those two images in my head at the same time. Like, they shouldn't even exist, and yet they do. Meanwhile, Ashley's parents at home have had no idea where their daughter is. And when 10 o'clock came and went that night without the door opening or the phone ringing, her mom, Michelle, immediately knew that something was very wrong. So Michelle trusted her gut, and she called the police that same night and found Ashley as missing. Investigators started searching right away, and after a few hours, they found Ashley's boyfriend's car sitting at Latterman Park. And inside the car, they found her job interview outfit and her basketball clothes. And both of them were completely unworn. And so by this point, investigators understood that the entire story Ashley told her parents that morning had been a cover. And whoever she planned to meet at that park was very likely the person who had taken her. So Michelle decided to go through Ashley's phone records looking for anything that might help. And she kept seeing the same number coming up over and over again, more than the other phone numbers in the phone. And when she looked it up, it turned out that it was Sam Shelton's number. So she called him. But Sam told her that he hadn't heard from Ashley all day and he just hung up. And investigators found that really suspicious, enough to bring Sam in for questioning. And over the next 12 hours, Sam worked his way through version after version of the same story. It was honestly kind of depressing. Like, Buddy couldn't even give one good lie. First, they were just friends. And then it was, okay, we're more than friends. And then, okay, yes, we were intimate. And yes, I was with her that day, but I swear I dropped her off by the side of the road. She was standing right there, totally fine, I swear. He just kept lying until eventually one of the detectives leaned forward and said to him, "If I went to your grandmother right now and told her everything you've said tonight, what is she going to say?" And Sam, when he heard that, just broke down sobbing and crying. And to my surprise, afterwards, he decided to tell them everything. And at around 2 in the morning on April 29th, which means that Ashley has been in those woods completely alone for almost 30 hours, Sam leads investigators to Citizens Park in the dark and ran. And as they were walking, Sam just kept telling them, "You're going to find her body here. I don't even know how I left her." And so they kept pushing through the muds, through the trees, through all of the bugs, following Sam to the spot. And when they got there, they found her with her arms folded in across her chest in a folded position. Ashley was drenched in water from hours in the rain, and she was covered in thousands of bug bites. And every single person standing in those woods was thinking the same thing. We're too late. One officer stepped away to call the coroner, and while he was on the phone, another officer was standing over Ashley's body, just staring at all of her injuries when something caught his eye. Ashley's chest was moving. I mean, just barely, but he was certain that he saw it move. The officer completely loses it and starts screaming, "She's breathing! She's breathing! Get the EMTs here now!" And EMTs rushed in, but because the woods were too dense for a stretcher, they had to use chainsaws to cut through the trees just to reach her. But despite how difficult that path was, they eventually got to her and they rushed her to a hospital where Ashley was placed in a medically induced coma. Her recovery took close to a full year because she had to relearn everything from the beginning. How to eat, how to drink, how to speak, how to hold her own head up, how to walk, how to use her hands. I cannot believe she survived that. Sam Shelton was arrested, charged, and sentenced to only 20 years in prison, but to this day, he has never said a single word of apology to Ashley or her family. And then in April of 2024, after serving only 17 out of those 20 years, Sam Shelton walked out of prison on parole.
The family's disappearance was just solved after more than 60 years. On December 7th, 1958, Kenneth and Barbara Martin, along with their 3 daughters, Barbie, Virginia, and Susan, left their home in Portland, Oregon and headed east on a road trip to the Columbia River Gorge. Their plan was to forage around and gather greenery to make Christmas wreaths and decorations. The family was traveling in their 1954 cream and red Ford Country Squire station wagon. A man named Dean Baxter recalled that the Martin family stopped by his gas station around 4 p.m. that day. This gas station was about 40 miles away from the Martin family home. Baxter reported that after the Martin family left his gas station, they continued traveling east. Later that day, a waitress named Clara York served the Martin family at Paradise Snack Bar in Hood River. This restaurant was about an hour away from Portland and would have been very close to the family's destination. Around dusk on December 7th, 1958, passersby reported seeing the Martin family on the north bank of the Columbia River in Washington state. On December 9th, 1958, 2 days after the Martin family reportedly left on their trip, the father, Kenneth Martin, did not report to his job at Eccles Electric Home Service Company. Also that day, Barbie, the eldest daughter, was reported absent from school by her teachers at Grant High School. And the younger 2 daughters, Virginia and Susan, were also reported absent that day by their teachers at Rose City School. That evening, the Martin family was reported missing by Kenneth's boss, Taylor Eccles. Around 11 p.m. on December 9th, 1958, police arrived at the Martin family home. There were no signs of foul play, and there were no signs that the family left in a hurry. Everything about the house looked completely normal. Shortly after the Martins disappeared, it was discovered that a stolen white 1951 Chevrolet was located in Cascade Locks, Oregon, where the Martins would have passed through on the way to their destination. And located near that stolen Chevrolet was a .38 Colt Commander handgun. It was covered in dried blood and had been left in the bushes. That handgun was never processed for evidence, meaning that the blood on it was never tested. However, the serial number on that handgun was traced back to a Frankenmeyer department store. It was learned that the Martins' eldest son, 28-year-old Donald, had worked at a Meyer and Frank department store about 2 years prior to the family's disappearance. Donald was a Navy veteran and he was attending Columbia University in New York City at the time that his family disappeared. When Donald worked at the Meyer and Frank department store, he had been accused of stealing several items, one of which was that specific handgun that was located near the stolen Chevrolet. It was also discovered that on December 8th, 1958, the day after the Martins disappeared, a man named Roy Light and another unnamed man were arrested in connection with that stolen Chevrolet. 2 men were arrested in Hood River, where the Martin family was seen at a restaurant in the area on the way to their destination. A waiter at the Paradise Snack Bar, where the Martin family had stopped on the way to where they were going, recalled that the Martin family and Roy Light were at the restaurant at the same time. He also reported that the Martin family and Roy left the restaurant at about the same time. On December 31st, 1958, a man called the police to report to them that he had witnessed a car speeding on the Baldock Freeway. And he told police that this car matched the description of the car that the Martin family was traveling in on their road trip. However, it's unclear whether this man saw the car speeding away on December 7th, when the family disappeared, or on December 31st when he reported it. In February 1959, 2 months after the Martin family disappeared, a volunteer searcher reported that he had found tire tracks leading off of a cliff at the Dalles, which was about 40 minutes away from Hood River and Cascade Locks. Those tire tracks were reportedly a match to the 1954 Ford Country Squire that the Martin family was driving. Also found near those tire tracks were paint chips. Those paint chips were sent off to the FBI for analysis, and they were identified as being a match to the car that the Martin family would have been driving. On May 1st, 1st, 1959, 5 months after the Martin family disappeared, a river drilling rig hooked something heavy onto its anchor. However, they were unable to determine what exactly had hooked on. This was in the same area where the tire tracks and the paint chips were found. In the early hours of May 2nd, 1959, a fisherman and his wife reported seeing what appeared to be bundles of clothing floating downstream near Cascade Locks. And the next day, May 3rd, the body of Susan Martin was discovered on the north bank of the Columbia River near Camas, Washington. Dental records confirmed her identity. The next day, on May 4th, the body of Virginia Martin was recovered. She was found near the Bonneville Dam, about an hour away from where her sister's body was recovered the day before. The medical examiner determined the cause of death for both girls to be drowning. The sheriff of Hood River County believed that when that river drilling rig hooked something heavy onto its anchor, it actually hooked onto the Martins family car on the bottom of the river. This would have allowed the bodies of Susan and Virginia to float out of the car and continue floating downstream where they were later found. And for whatever reason, the bodies of the rest of the family remained trapped in the car. The Martins' eldest son, Donald, reportedly did not attend a memorial service for his sisters. In 1966, Donald inherited the family's small estate. He then ended up moving to Hawaii, where he became a school teacher. He also got married and had 3 children. Donald Martin died in October 2004 at the age of 73. Decades later, in 2018, a diver named Archer Mayo started dedicating his time to searching for the missing Martin family. And in late 2024, Mayo discovered what he believed to be a Ford station wagon in the Columbia River. In March 2025, authorities were able to recover parts of the vehicle from the river. Only the frame and some small parts of the car were able to be recovered. However, enough of the car was pulled up out of the water to be able to positively identify it as the Martin family's 1954 Ford Country Squire station wagon. In August 2025, further searches of the water located sets of human remains. Othram, a forensic lab based in Texas, used DNA from living relatives of the Martin family to compare to the remains. And finally, after 68 years, Kenneth, Barbara, and Barbie Martin were positively identified. The search was over. Investigators stated that they found no evidence of foul play. Despite this, many people are not convinced that this was simply a tragic accident.
Y'all, your jaws are about to hit the floor. So this is Robin Polson. I've been covering her case for about a year now, and I have some new information. I'm going to do a backstory first in case anybody doesn't know who she is and what she did, and then we'll go over the new stuff, and oh my God. So I'm going to try to do the backstory as quick as I can. Robin Polson, 43-year-old mother from Washington, Illinois. She was working as a hair cosmetologist. She got pregnant. Everybody was really happy for her. Nobody had met the dad. She said that he was this guy in the military and he was gone. But come to find out, that is not the case at all. The dad of the baby was her own teenage daughter's 14-year-old ex-boyfriend. Here's the boy with her daughter at an 8th grade dance that she actually happened to chaperone. Here they are when they graduated from 8th grade. Here they are not long after that when she took them all to Six Flags. Now, what Robin's daughter didn't know is that she had already started grooming him. Not long after this, he and his family moved to Nevada, but his family said that his behavior totally changed. He started acting out, acting defiant, and all he wanted to do was get back to Washington. She groomed him all throughout the summer and fall, and then that year over Christmas break, he ended up coming back to Washington, Illinois with his stepmom. And this is a text message that she had sent the owner of a tanning salon on December 1st. It says, "Hey, it's Robin Polson. Would you happen to have an opening for a spray tan? Blah, 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 blah. My boyfriend is coming home from Nevada. He's in the Army, and I haven't seen him since June. And I have to look perfection. He's coming home the 18th. We are newly dating, so I'm going to be getting freaky for the first time with him, so you have to make me look perfect. No pressure. We just started dating in June, and things got really serious, although it's been purely over texting and FaceTime, so I desperately need your assistance." And then after a series of lies and manipulation, she was able to convince his family to let him move in with her. She told them that she could help with his behavior issues and that he's friends with her own teenage son and that she's willing to help, and basically made it out like she's trying to do a good thing. Around Easter of 2024 is when she got pregnant with the baby, and she told everybody that the father was some guy in the military and just made up all of these lies. Here they are at the gender reveal party. She had told people that he was the military boyfriend's younger brother. Like, she told all of these people all of these different things while she literally had a 14-year-old child living with her like he was her husband. She even had him there at the hospital when she was giving birth to their baby. Anyway, after the baby was born, some people close to her started doing some digging and found out exactly who he is. Not some military boyfriend or military boyfriend's younger brother, but her own teenage daughter's ex-boyfriend. And they called the police. Now, the baby was born at the end of January 2024. Police were called, I think, when the baby was just a couple weeks old. She wasn't arrested until November because they had to do DNA testing and send it off to the Illinois Crime Lab. And they knew ahead of time that it would likely take several months to come back. But what I don't understand, and I'm about to get to the new stuff, is why did they have to wait for that DNA to come back to make an arrest? We already know that they seized her phone records, and in her phone, they found pictures of them doing things together. They should have been able to arrest her on that. I mean, she literally had a video of that child doing that. But they chose to wait until the DNA came back, proving that he fathered the baby. So for 9 months, she got to be out free. And during those 9 months, he continued living with her and she continued SAing him. Now, just to clarify, at the very beginning of the investigation, she did briefly kick him out. But from what I've been told by multiple people close to the situation, it only took a few months before he was back with her. And she's not even facing a handful of charges. Make that make sense. She groomed that child for months, booked a hotel room for an entire weekend so she could repeatedly SA him, and then brag to the tanning salon owner about how amazing it was. She admitted to somebody that she got pregnant on purpose. They found photos and videos in her phone. He lived with her for over a year in her bedroom like he was her husband. And she's facing like 4 charges. I swear, people can SA an animal and get more charges than what this woman is facing. Now, the new stuff. I recently found out, and it has been confirmed, that her mother has been acting as a middleman, allowing Robin to have phone communications with the underage victim. And yes, you heard that correct. She is behind bars, but her mother has been assisting with the facilitation of keeping them in contact. And don't forget, all jail calls are recorded, so they are well aware. Like I said, it's been confirmed. And guess what's happening to her or to her mother because of it? Absolutely nothing. Her mom and her sister both knew what she was doing to that boy the entire time it was happening. They never said anything to anybody. They never reported it. They enabled it. Neither of them are facing any charges. And now there is proof that her mother is continuing to enable it. And they're not even looking into it, from what I've been told. Now, I don't even know who to be mad at about this. The detectives on the case from the Washington Police Department, I do know for a fact that one of them, I think his last name is Hinkle, went to high school with her. Officers in the jail who haven't revoked her phone call privileges, or the state's attorney's office who aren't pressing more charges and who aren't doing a single damn thing to her mother for facilitating this. This is all happening in Tazewell County, Illinois. And so many people ask why the prevalence of this sort of thing keeps growing. And this right here is why, because so many people can do stuff like this and pretty much get away with it. Even though she's behind bars, she continues to re-victimize this child, and apparently that's just fine.